Billionaire's mistress mocks his pregnant wife, only to regret it instantly. Ethan Caldwell had the world at his feet. As the CEO of Caldwell Technologies, his name was synonymous with innovation in Silicon Valley. His empire stretched from artificial intelligence breakthroughs to high-profile collaborations with business moguls like Richard Branson. His life was a spectacle: luxury penthouses, private jets, and exclusive charity galas filled with the world's elite. Yet, beneath the headlines and prestige, there was a secret threatening to unravel everything. She wasn't just any woman. She was his mistress, a stunning socialite who thrived on attention and lived for the thrill of power. But Vanessa's favorite pastime was something far more sinister: taunting Ethan's gentle, pregnant wife, Lillian Caldwell. The moment Vanessa pushed too far, she triggered a chain reaction neither of them could have foreseen. In this gripping saga of betrayal, revenge, and redemption, one arrogant laugh would set off a series of events that could destroy Ethan's empire, proving that sometimes karma comes for the powerful in the most unexpected ways. Ethan Caldwell wasn't born into wealth. His childhood in a small town in Vermont was defined by struggle, but he had an insatiable hunger for success. Armed with intelligence and relentless ambition, he earned a scholarship to Stanford University, where he studied under some of the greatest minds in business and technology. By the time he graduated, he had a plan, a vision that would redefine the way AI interacted with human decision-making. Through tireless work and calculated risks, he turned a small software startup into Caldwell Technologies, a company that soon became a cornerstone of Silicon Valley. Investors like Sequoia Capital and Richard Branson took notice, drawn to Ethan's ability to foresee technological advancements before the rest of the world. But for all his professional triumphs, Ethan's personal life was a tangled mess. His Fifth Avenue penthouse in New York was a symbol of power, his fleet of private jets a testament to his influence, and his name adorned the guest lists of the most exclusive charity galas. His philanthropy ranged from funding STEM scholarships to donating millions to medical research, making him a media darling, a billionaire with a heart. It was at one of these glittering charity events that he first met Vanessa DeLuca. She was impossible to ignore. Tall, with cascading dark hair, piercing emerald eyes, and a confidence that made heads turn, Vanessa exuded the kind of magnetism that could captivate a room. Though she was an aspiring actress, her biggest roles had been minor parts in off-Broadway productions. But Vanessa had no intention of fading into the background. She had clawed her way into elite social circles, always hunting for the next opportunity. That night, near the Beluga Caviar Station, she caught Ethan's attention. At first, she was just another guest in a glittering gown, but then she spoke. "I've been following your AI developments closely, Mr. Caldwell," she purred, tilting her champagne flute slightly. "Your latest work in predictive analytics for healthcare is nothing short of groundbreaking. I must say, you're even more impressive in person." Flattery and charm dripped from every word, but there was something different about Vanessa's approach. Ethan was accustomed to admiration, yet she wasn't just praising his wealth. She was speaking about his work with an insight that suggested she understood it. She peppered the conversation with technical references, balancing intelligence with a disarming elegance that made her instantly unforgettable. And just like that, Ethan Caldwell, the man who had built his empire on logic and precision, found himself making the first mistake in a series that would change everything. Ethan Caldwell found himself drawn in faster than he realized. At home, Lillian Caldwell, his wife, remained blissfully unaware of the growing storm. A former ballet dancer from Chicago, Lillian was devoted to preparing for their first child. Her days were filled with reading parenting books, designing the nursery, and dreaming about the life they were building together. She trusted Ethan completely, standing by his side with unwavering belief in the love they shared, believing it was strong enough to last a lifetime. But Vanessa DeLuca had other plans. After their initial meeting at the charity gala, Vanessa made sure their paths continued to cross. She appeared at tech conferences, charming her way onto guest lists and conveniently volunteering at the same STEM nonprofit events Ethan sponsored. She researched his business ventures, memorized his latest product launches, and even tailored her interests to align with his: whiskey tasting, Beethoven symphonies, and modern art collecting. She made herself unforgettable. And Ethan, despite telling himself he was above temptation, found it harder and harder to ignore her presence. It started subtly. Glances held a second too long, a fleeting brush of fingers when exchanging a glass of champagne, casual conversations that somehow felt charged. He told himself that Vanessa was just a fascinating conversationalist, nothing more. That was the lie he clung to. At home, Lillian would greet him in the evenings with a soft smile, her hands resting on her growing belly as she asked about his day. He would murmur something vague, his mind still replaying the way Vanessa laughed at one of his jokes or the way she looked at him across a crowded room. The turning point came after an exhausting shareholder meeting at Caldwell Technologies. Ethan had spent hours negotiating with investors, closing a crucial deal that would secure the company's next AI expansion into Europe. He was drained, his mind heavy with figures and projections. Then his phone vibrated. A message from Vanessa. "Dinner? You look like you could use a little escape." He should have ignored it. He should have gone home. Instead, he found himself seated across from Vanessa in the dimly lit corner of an exclusive Manhattan restaurant, sipping aged whiskey and losing track of time. One dinner turned into stolen moments. Stolen moments turned into a full-blown affair. Ethan justified it. He told himself that Lillian was too preoccupied with the pregnancy to notice. He convinced himself that nothing would change, that he could be a good husband, a good father, and still keep this part of his life separate. And Vanessa? She played her role perfectly, for now. She let him believe she was satisfied with being his secret, that she understood his world better than his wife ever could, that she was merely an indulgence, a thrilling escape from responsibility. How wrong he was. Vanessa was many things: beautiful, ambitious, calculating, but she was never content with second place. To her, Ethan wasn't just a lover. He was a direct pathway to the life she had always craved. She knew how to stroke his ego, how to feign jealousy just enough to make him feel wanted, how to plant seeds of doubt about Lillian's ability to keep him entertained once the baby arrived. Meanwhile, Lillian remained blissfully unaware. She planned her baby shower, picked out pastel-colored onesies, and told her friends how excited Ethan was about becoming a father. She noticed he seemed distracted lately, but she chalked it up to work stress, because love can be blind. And Lillian Caldwell was about to learn just how fragile her perfect world truly was. As Vanessa's demands grew, so did her presence in Ethan's life. She wanted more than just secret rendezvous and whispered promises. She craved a penthouse of her own, closets filled with designer labels, and a luxury sports car that screamed exclusivity. At first, Ethan indulged her in moderation: a discreet apartment in Soho, an allowance that rivaled a CEO's salary, and the occasional lavish gift. But Vanessa wasn't interested in being a hidden indulgence. She wanted proof that she wasn't just another affair. She wanted a ring. She wanted his promise that he would leave Lillian. Ethan recoiled at the thought. His public image was deeply intertwined with Lillian. Their marriage had been a fairy tale in the press, their joint philanthropic efforts making them a beloved power couple. Investors adored Lillian's warm presence. She softened Ethan's otherwise calculating business persona. Any scandal, any hint of infidelity could shatter everything he had built. But Vanessa refused to be placated with half measures. She had played the patient mistress long enough, and she certainly wouldn't stay a secret forever. One afternoon, she stormed into his office. The executive suite crackled with tension as Vanessa issued an ultimatum. "I'm not going to wait around forever, Ethan. I deserve more than being hidden away like some dirty little secret." Ethan's pulse spiked. Employees lingered just outside. Any raised voices could be a disaster. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into his private lounge, closing the door behind them. "Keep your voice down," he hissed. "We'll talk about this later." Vanessa shot him a glare, her brown eyes blazing with fury. "You always say that. I want more, Ethan. I'm done being your second choice." With that, she yanked her wrist free, collected her Chanel purse, the gift from him, and strode out, heels clicking against the polished floor. For the first time, panic settled in Ethan's chest. He was losing control. That night, Lillian knew something was wrong. Ethan barely touched his dinner, his mind elsewhere. When she reached across the table, her fingers gently brushing his, he pulled away. A sharp pain bloomed in her chest. Had she done something wrong? She wanted to ask, wanted to demand an answer, but she swallowed the lump in her throat and retreated to their bedroom instead, doubt creeping into the corners of her mind. The next morning, she decided to surprise him. Ethan had always loved small gestures. She remembered how he used to smile when she brought him coffee from his favorite cafe in the mornings. Maybe that's what they needed. A moment of normalcy. Balancing a tray with 2 steaming lattes, she made her way through the sleek, glass-walled corridors of Caldwell Technologies. Employees smiled warmly at her, a few even asking how she was feeling. "Almost there," she'd reply, cradling her growing belly. She reached Ethan's private office. The door was slightly open, and then laughter. A woman's laughter. Not just any laughter, Vanessa's. Lillian's heart skipped a beat. Carefully, she nudged the door open a crack. Inside, Vanessa sat perched on Ethan's desk, leaning in far too close. His posture was tense, but he didn't move away. Lillian stood frozen, a swirl of dread tightening in her chest. Was this what she thought it was? Her grip on the tray tightened, her breath shallow. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Vanessa was just a colleague needing Ethan's help. And then Vanessa spoke. "Just give me time," Ethan murmured, his voice low. "I need to handle this the right way." Vanessa laughed softly, a cruel, knowing sound. "All I hear are excuses." Then her voice dropped into a mocking whisper, but it was loud enough that Lillian heard every word. "Your precious wife this, your business reputation that." Meanwhile, look at her, waddling around clueless. Honestly, it's laughable. Lillian's entire body went cold. Her knees buckled. Her vision blurred. The coffee cup slipped from her trembling hands, shattering against the marble floor. And in that moment, everything fell apart. The tray clattered against the marble floor, the crash loud enough to snap their attention away from each other. Vanessa turned first, and for a split second, Lillian saw it. The delight flashing in the younger woman's eyes, as if she was thrilled to be caught. Ethan's face went pale. He knew instantly that Lillian had heard everything, had heard Vanessa's cruel laughter, her mocking words, the way she had ridiculed his pregnant wife. Lillian staggered backward, her heels slipping slightly against the polished floor. The coffee slipped from her trembling hands, hitting the ground with a splash, scalding her ankles. But she felt nothing. Nothing except the knife of betrayal piercing through her ribs. "Lillian?" Ethan lunged toward her, but she turned and ran. Tears blurred her vision as she stumbled into the hallway, gasps and whispers rippling through the office as employees watched her flee. Alone in his office, Ethan turned on Vanessa, his voice sharp with rage. Was that necessary? His voice was low but furious. "Mocking my pregnant wife? That's my child she's carrying." Vanessa shrugged, her expression unrepentant. "Oh, don't act so outraged, Ethan," she said, rolling her eyes. "You brought me into this. You were always going to get caught. You just didn't handle it properly." Her words were cold, calculated. And for the first time, Ethan saw her clearly. She felt no remorse, no guilt, no shame. Only satisfaction in watching Lillian fall apart. Regret curled in Ethan's chest, regret for what he had done, but also a deeper, darker resentment toward Vanessa herself. The woman he had once found irresistible now felt like a mistake he couldn't take back. Meanwhile, Lillian sat in the back of a taxi, her body racked with silent sobs. Her hands clutched protectively around her belly, feeling the baby shift. The world outside blurred as her life shattered into pieces. When she finally reached the penthouse, she barely made it through the door before collapsing onto the floor, weeping. How had she been so blind? How had she let herself believe in him? Her chest ached with every breath as she stared around the apartment they had built together, the life they had built together. And then, suddenly, she knew. She couldn't stay here. She had to leave. With shaky hands, she began packing, clothes shoved into a suitcase, passports pulled from the drawer. But then, a soft kick from inside her. She froze, her breath catching. She wasn't alone in this. She had to be strong, for her child, if not for herself. Should she confront Ethan? Or should she disappear, go back to Chicago to her mother's house and never look back? Her phone buzzed before she could decide. Ethan. She ignored it. Then another call, and another, and then texts. Dozens of them. Lillian, please. Let me explain. I know how this looks. Just talk to me. Every word felt like another twist of the knife. Finally, she answered. Explain? Her voice was hoarse, trembling. Explain that you've been cheating on me? That you've been lying for months? Or do you need to clarify how your mistress enjoys mocking your pregnant wife for fun? Ethan's voice cracked on the other end. It's not like that. Then tell me what it is like, Ethan. She cut him off, her voice fierce with heartbreak. Because all I saw was my husband in his office with another woman, and that woman laughing about the fact that I'm carrying your child. The silence that followed was suffocating. She waited for him to lie, to make excuses, but Ethan said nothing, because he couldn't. He couldn't lie his way out of this. Finally, his voice was barely a whisper. I'm coming home, she swallowed, hands tightening into fists. Don't bother. Lillian, please, don't leave. We need to talk, face to face. She wanted to hang up, to block his number, to disappear before he got here. But some small, broken part of her needed to look him in the eyes, needed to hear the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The door swung open, and there he was, his face raw with regret, his tie loosened, his posture tense. But Lillian didn't see the man she loved anymore. She saw a stranger. She saw a liar. Her anger swallowed her grief whole. Don't come near me. Her voice was low, shaking with fury. The only reason you're home now is because I caught you. If I hadn't walked into that office today, you'd still be playing me for a fool. Ethan took a step forward, reaching for her. She flinched away, her arms instinctively wrapping around her belly, protecting herself. A look of pure pain flickered across Ethan's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. Finally, he whispered, I'm sorry, and for the first time, he meant it. But Lillian didn't care. I don't want your apologies. Her voice broke. I want an explanation. Ethan exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. It started innocently. Lillian let out a bitter laugh. There was nothing innocent about it. She stepped back, her voice filled with something sharper than anger. Finality. Not when you're married. Not when I'm pregnant. Ethan lowered his head, shame radiating off him. I know I have no excuse, he murmured, voice hollow. But it's over now, I swear. Lillian's eyes flashed with fury. Over? Her voice shook. She was in your office today, mocking me, Ethan, laughing about my pregnancy. That doesn't look like over to me. He winced but held her gaze. I told her it's done. I just needed time to sort things out. Sort things out? Lillian let out a hollow laugh. What exactly is there to sort out? What business does your mistress have with your company? Ethan hesitated. That 1 second of silence told her everything. Her stomach dropped. Oh my God. Lillian? She's blackmailing you, isn't she? His silence confirmed it. Lillian felt the room tilt, nausea twisting in her stomach. How? She demanded, voice trembling with anger and heartbreak. Ethan exhaled sharply, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Emails, recordings, some private messages. Lillian sank into a chair, pressing a hand to her forehead. So you weren't trying to end it. You were trying to ease her out, softly, so she wouldn't ruin your precious image and tank your company's stock. Ethan's jaw clenched shut. He didn't deny it, because she was right. The air between them thickened, heavy with betrayal and sorrow. Finally, Lillian stood. The tears dried. In their place was something colder, sharper, resolve. I need space. Ethan's head snapped up. Lillian, I'll stay here tonight because I'm exhausted. Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. But tomorrow, I'm leaving. I'm going to my mother's in Chicago. Ethan stared, his throat working. Please, don't. You can deal with your mistress, your blackmail, your business deals, your conscience. She turned away, voice cold as steel. But don't you dare think this is something I'll just forgive. Then she walked out, leaving him standing alone, surrounded by the wreckage of his own mistakes. The next morning, Lillian boarded a flight to Chicago. At O'Hare International Airport, her mother, Miriam Carter, stood waiting. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. One look at Lillian's tear-streaked face and trembling shoulders was enough to tell her everything she needed to know. She simply opened her arms, and Lillian, feeling more lost than she ever had, collapsed into them. That evening, Lillian finally told her everything. The affair, the betrayal, the way Vanessa had mocked her pregnancy. Miriam listened silently, her eyes dark with anger, but her hands gentle as she held her daughter close. "You are stronger than you think, sweetheart," she murmured, brushing Lillian's hair back. "And right now, you need to focus on yourself, on the baby, on what truly matters." Lillian nodded, pressing a hand to her belly. She had spent so long thinking about Ethan, his lies, his mistakes, his excuses. No more. Her child was the only thing that mattered now. Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Ethan was drowning in guilt. His calls to Lillian went unanswered. During a board meeting, he barely heard a word about the latest financial projections. The investors, normally hanging on to his every word, were now whispering behind his back, casting worried glances in his direction. Word had spread quietly about Lillian's abrupt departure. Rumors circulated like wildfire. Something was wrong. And everyone knew it. Everyone except for Vanessa, who was thriving. She strolled into his private Soho apartment that night, wearing a brand new designer coat and an air of smug satisfaction. Ethan barely looked at her before turning back to his whiskey. "Vanessa, you shouldn't be here." She didn't listen. Instead, she shrugged off her coat, revealing a tight black dress, and closed the distance between them. Before he could stop her, she pressed a kiss to his lips. Ethan stiffened, and for the first time he felt nothing. Absolutely nothing. He pulled away. Hard. "Stop." His voice was firm, his body rigid. "This has gone too far." Vanessa's smile didn't waver. "Oh, Ethan," she purred, running a finger down his chest. "Don't tell me you're actually missing your pregnant wife already?" He took a full step back, shaking his head. "You don't get it, do you?" His voice was tired, raw, filled with something she'd never heard from him before. Regret. Real regret. Vanessa's smirk faltered. "What are you talking about?" Ethan exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. And then he said the words that sealed her fate. "She's my wife, Vanessa, and she's carrying my child, Vanessa." Ethan's voice was hoarse, his patience fraying. "I messed up, badly, but I can't just throw her away like she means nothing." Vanessa rolled her eyes, arms crossing over her chest. "Oh, please," she scoffed. "And what about me, Ethan? I've invested time, my own heart into this. You promised me a life beyond being your dirty little secret. That's why I stayed." His jaw tightened. "I never promised you anything that would destroy my family." His voice hardened. "This has to stop." Vanessa took a slow step forward, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You think you can just walk away?" Her lips curled into a smile that sent a cold chill down his spine. "I have months' worth of evidence, Ethan. Texts, emails, even voice recordings." Ethan's stomach clenched. "Imagine," she continued, "how your shareholders, your board, and the press will react when I leak it. You could lose everything. Your reputation, Carter Tech, your precious philanthropic image. Oh, and let's not forget your little deal with Hudson Capital." She smirked. "I'm sure they'd love to hear about this." Ethan's hands balled into fists at his sides. "Are you blackmailing me?" Vanessa's smirk widened. "I prefer to call it insurance." Her tone was silken steel. "So don't even think about ditching me for that pathetic little wife you left behind." Ethan's blood boiled, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't just a scandal anymore. This was a war. A war that could destroy everything. His company, his future, and most of all, his child's security. Lillian stared out the window of a quiet law office near the waterfront, watching the waves crash against the shore. Across from her sat Alan Roy, an old friend of her late father's. Once a formidable courtroom legend, now semi-retired, but still sharp as ever. "If your husband's mistress is blackmailing him," Alan said, tapping a pen against his legal pad, "that complicates things." His tone was grave. "Divorce is one option. Given the length of your marriage, his wealth, and the fact that you're pregnant, you'd be entitled to a substantial settlement." Lillian's eyes burned, but she refused to cry. "I'm not after his money, Alan," she whispered. He betrayed me. And her voice broke. "She mocked me, mocked our baby." Alan squeezed her hand gently. "Then my advice is this: file for legal separation first, protect your rights, document everything." His voice softened. "If Ethan is truly remorseful, maybe there's a way forward. But never forget, your child's future comes first. Your well-being comes first." Lillian nodded, pressing a hand to her belly. Maybe she didn't know what her marriage's future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to protect her baby, no matter what. For the next week, Lillian ignored Ethan's calls. He sent flowers, called at odd hours, even flew to Chicago to see her. She refused. The heartbreak was too raw and she needed time to think. With each passing day, her resolve strengthened. She wasn't just walking away from Ethan. She was taking control of her life. Carter Tech was suffering. With Ethan's mind elsewhere, deals stalled, and whispers of his personal troubles spread like wildfire. Shareholders grew restless, demanding an emergency board meeting. Ethan stood before them, hands braced on the table. Everything is under control. His voice was firm, but the tension in his jaw betrayed him. The investors exchanged skeptical glances, because Ethan didn't look like a man in control. He looked like a man losing everything. Vanessa, growing bolder, started showing up at Carter Tech's offices. The employees noticed. They noticed how she waltzed into his private office, how she whispered in low, knowing tones. They noticed how their once unstoppable CEO suddenly seemed trapped. Whispers turned into rumors, and rumors turned into speculation. Something was off, and everyone knew it. Everyone, except Vanessa, who thought she was winning. She had no idea how wrong she was. Vanessa's ambition was growing. She had gone from demanding gifts to demanding power. "I've been thinking," she purred one evening, crossing her legs gracefully as she slid a glossy headshot across Ethan's desk. "Imagine your company partnering with a passionate actress known for her activism. Appoint me as a brand ambassador, maybe a philanthropic liaison. It would do wonders for your image." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Are you out of your mind?" he snapped. "No one in my circle is going to buy this. They'll see right through it." Vanessa only smirked, unfazed. "Then give me a reason to stay quiet." She leaned forward, her voice like silk laced with poison. "If not a title, then money. I want security, enough to retire comfortably. Think of it as an investment in your future." Ethan felt cornered. He needed advice, and he needed it fast. Ethan sat across from Madeline Cho, his most trusted attorney and one of the sharpest legal minds in New York. As he explained Vanessa's threats, Madeline's expression darkened. "This woman is dangerous," she said, setting down her pen. "We need evidence against her, proof of malicious intent, maybe even extortion. But right now, all we have is your word against hers." Ethan raked a hand through his hair. "What if I pay her off? Get her to sign an NDA?" Madeline shook her head. "That's only a temporary fix. If she thinks she can get more, she'll break it." She hesitated, then added carefully, "And if you pay her off without a clear legal trail, it could look like you're admitting guilt." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Have you spoken to Lillian?" Madeline asked. Ethan let out a slow, heavy breath. "She won't speak to me." His voice was raw. "I've left voicemails, sent messages, flowers. She's with her mother in Chicago, probably filing for divorce." The last word caught in his throat. Madeline studied him, her usual cold professionalism softening for a fraction of a second. "You need to tell her everything." Her voice was gentle but firm. "If Vanessa is blackmailing you, Lillian might be willing to help end this, for her own sake and for the baby. But she can't help you if she doesn't know the truth." Ethan swallowed hard. He knew Madeline was right. If he wanted a chance to fix this mess, his marriage, his company, his life, he had to face his mistakes head-on. Lillian sat on the couch of her mother's cozy suburban home, absently rubbing her belly. The baby was moving more than usual, almost as if sensing her turmoil. She had just finished reviewing the preliminary separation papers when the doorbell rang. Her mother, Eleanor, answered it. A moment later, she turned toward Lillian, her expression carefully neutral. "It's him." Lillian's heart pounded. But she took a deep breath, straightened her posture, and stood. She wouldn't let Ethan see how much he had broken her. Ethan looked different. Dressed in a simple suit, he had none of his usual confidence. Dark circles rimmed his eyes. His shoulders were tense as if bracing for impact. "Lillian," he said softly, searching her face for any sign of forgiveness. She folded her arms over her belly, her expression unreadable. Sensing the tension, Eleanor spoke firmly but politely. "Ethan, if you want to talk to my daughter, do it with respect, and don't upset her more than you already have." Then she stepped aside. In the living room, Lillian motioned for Ethan to sit, but she remained standing, keeping a safe distance. "You have 5 minutes," she said coolly. "Then I want you to leave." Ethan took a slow, measured breath. "I'm so sorry," he began, his voice shaking. "I know I hurt you in the worst way possible, and I'll never forgive myself for it." He swallowed hard. "But there's more." Lillian didn't react, but he could feel the tension in the air. Vanessa is blackmailing me, he admitted. She has emails, voice recordings, things that could ruin my company. And he exhaled sharply, I can't handle it alone. Silence. Lillian stared at him, not with shock, not even with anger, but with something worse. Disbelief. So that's why you're here? She whispered. Ethan's stomach dropped, because for the first time he realized just how much damage he had done. Lillian wasn't surprised that Vanessa had turned on him. She had expected it. The only thing she hadn't expected was that he would have the audacity to ask for her help. Lillian's voice was steady, but her eyes burned with resentment. So that's why you're here? She said, her tone sharp. Not to make amends, not because you truly regret what you did, but because you need me to help you save your empire. Ethan shook his head desperately. No, that's not it. His voice cracked. I do want to fix this, but I'm out of options. Madeline says I need your help. If you can testify that Vanessa harassed you, humiliated you, if we can prove she's extorting me, we might have a legal case. Lillian laughed bitterly, shaking her head. You mean when she mocked me in your office? When she called me pathetic for carrying your child? That was cruel, Ethan, but it wasn't a threat. And legally, that's not enough. Ethan looked away, frustration etched into his features. I understand if you hate me. He hesitated. But you should know, if you expose me, take this to court, it won't just destroy my career. The company could collapse, and if that happens, it affects you too. Financially, I mean, our child. Lillian's stomach twisted, not because she cared about his business, but because for once, Ethan wasn't trying to justify his betrayal. He was laying out the cold, hard truth. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Lillian exhaled slowly. I don't want revenge, Ethan. Her voice softened, but only slightly. I just want to move on, to raise my baby in peace, and to never see that woman again. She paused, studying his exhausted face. If your company falls apart, that's on you, not me. Ethan nodded, tears glistening in his eyes. You're right. Lillian watched him carefully, then said, I'll think about it, about whether I can help you gather evidence. She straightened her shoulders. But don't mistake that for forgiveness. I'm still filing for legal separation, and if you truly regret what you did, you won't fight me on this. No games, no manipulation, understood? Ethan swallowed hard, then nodded. Understood. Whatever you need, Lillian, I'll do it. As soon as he left, Lillian collapsed onto the couch, emotionally drained. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel like the broken, betrayed wife. She felt like a mother protecting her child, and she was ready to take back control. Vanessa's demands were growing bolder. She handed Ethan a neatly typed list, an itemized breakdown of her expenses, luxury spa treatments, designer handbags, a new sports car, exclusive gala gowns. These aren't just expenses, she purred, sipping champagne. They're investments in our relationship. Ethan felt his stomach turn. Vanessa wasn't just a mistress anymore. She was a predator circling her prey. But she had underestimated him. Guided by Madeline, Ethan planned a trap. He booked a meeting with Vanessa at an exclusive penthouse suite, pretending to negotiate a settlement. What she didn't know, the room was rigged with hidden cameras and audio recorders. He would get her confession on tape. Something solid, something undeniable, something that could end this nightmare. Vanessa arrived in style, draped in a sequined black dress that shimmered under the chandelier light. She swirled her champagne glass with a languid grace, smirking as she took a seat. Let's talk about my terms, she said smoothly. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. I need to know exactly what you want. Vanessa sighed dramatically, then smiled. Jacob, we've been over this. She stretched her arms lazily. I want security, a future. $10 million should do it, plus a monthly stipend. She paused, tilting her head. Or we go public. Ethan's pulse hammered, but he forced himself to nod. 10 million is a lot. Vanessa shrugged, completely unbothered. Is it? Your net worth is close to $1 billion, give or take, and if Lillian divorces you? She leaned in, her smile turning cruel. You'll lose even more. Ethan felt rage coil in his chest at the way she so casually weaponized Lillian's pain, but he didn't react. Not yet. I need assurances, he said, that once I pay, you won't come back for more. An NDA. Every text, every recording, deleted. My lawyers will handle the transaction. Vanessa grinned, her eyes gleaming with greed. Agreed, darling, but my only condition. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a sultry whisper. I want to see the money first. The evidence was airtight. And now, Vanessa was finished. Ethan stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the marble floor. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life, Vanessa." Her smile faltered. "What?" Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, sleek device, a hidden audio recorder. He clicked play. Vanessa's own voice filled the air, clear, undeniable, dripping with blackmail. Her face drained of color. "You?" she swallowed. "You set me up?" Ethan's expression was stone cold. "I told you this would end badly for you." Vanessa shot up from her seat, rage flashing in her eyes. "You think you've won?" "This isn't over, Jacob." "It is." He grabbed his coat, fixing her with one final stare. "You played your game. Now it's my turn." Then he walked out, leaving her speechless, because for the first time she had lost. "I want the money in my account first," Vanessa purred, swirling her champagne. "Once that happens, I'll hand over the materials. But let's not drag this out. I'm getting bored of waiting." She smiled, believing she had Ethan completely cornered. She had no idea that hidden cameras had captured every single damning word. Ethan fought the urge to exhale in relief. He kept his expression neutral, shook her hand as if resigned to his fate, and walked out of the penthouse suite. What Vanessa didn't know? Just one room over, Madeline Kim and two senior attorneys were watching the live feed, already drafting a legal preemptive strike. Vanessa thought she had control, but Ethan had just turned the game around. 2 days later, Vanessa received a formal letter from Madeline's law firm. The message was clear and brutal. "Your attempt to extort Ethan Calloway in exchange for silence is not only unethical, but criminal. We have documented proof of your demands. If you continue, we will take legal action, including pressing felony charges." Vanessa saw red. She stormed into Ethan's office, shoving past his assistant, ignoring the gasps from employees. The door slammed against the wall. She brandished the letter in his face, eyes wild with fury. "You set me up, you bastard." Ethan stood slowly, his expression calm despite the tension buzzing in the air. "Vanessa, calm down." "No, I won't calm down," she shrieked. "You think you can play me? You'll pay for this." A security guard stepped forward, but Ethan held up a hand, signaling him to wait. He locked eyes with her, his voice quiet but razor-sharp. "If you release anything, we'll take this to the district attorney." "This is checkmate, Vanessa." Vanessa's face twisted with hatred. "You think you've won?" she spat. "Even if you lock me up, I'll make sure everyone knows about us. The tabloids will eat this up. Lillian will never forgive you." Ethan let his shoulders drop, his voice low and certain. "She already knows." For the first time, Vanessa hesitated. Ethan took a step closer. "You have no power over me anymore. Leave, now, and never contact me again." The finality in his voice made something flicker in her eyes. Fear. Her jaw clenched. "You'll regret this," she hissed. Then she turned on her heel and marched out, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. The moment the door slammed shut, Ethan felt a wave of relief. It was over. But as he sat back down at his desk staring at the city skyline, he knew there was one battle left to fight, and this time it wasn't about his company, his reputation, or his money. It was about his family. Lillian sat on the back porch of her mother's home in Chicago, hands gently cradling her growing belly. She was 8 months pregnant now, and no matter how much she tried to focus on the baby, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. Some nights, she dreamed about him, the man he used to be before the betrayal, and she'd wake up with tears on her pillow. She wasn't sure if she missed him, or if she just missed the illusion of the life they had before. Meanwhile, Ethan had thrown himself into work at Calloway Technologies. Publicly, he was still the poised CEO, giving press interviews, finalizing international deals, even delivering a keynote speech at a high-profile charity gala. But privately, he was hollow. There were no late-night texts from Lillian, no ultrasound pictures sent his way, no updates on the baby. She had completely shut him out, and it was killing him. Then one night, everything changed. Lillian had been having headaches for days, but she brushed it off as his exhaustion. Then her doctor noticed something alarming. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. "We need to monitor this closely," he told her. "This could be the early stages of preeclampsia." She nodded, promising to rest. But that night, as she tossed and turned, dread settled deep in her stomach. What if something went wrong? What if her baby was in danger? Then the phone rang. Her mother, Lydia, answered. A brief silence. Then she turned, her expression urgent. "Lillian, it's Ethan." Lillian hesitated. Her heart pounded as she reached for the phone. "Your doctor called me." Ethan's voice was trembling. "He tried to reach you, but you didn't pick up. He's worried about your condition." Lillian bit her lip. "I'm handling it." "Lillian, please." His voice broke slightly. "Let me come. Let me be there for you and the baby." A storm of emotions swirled inside her. Part of her wanted to slam the phone down, to shut him out forever. But another part of her, the part that was scared, the part that was still trying to figure out if she could trust him again, hesitated. Because no matter what had happened between them, this baby was his too. And she wasn't sure if she had the strength to go through this alone. A part of Lillian wanted to shut him out forever. But a baby changes everything. No matter how broken things were, a father's support could still be invaluable. After a long silence, she exhaled. "Fine, you can come. But don't expect forgiveness. I need support, not empty apologies." Ethan stepped off the plane, suitcase in hand. The moment he saw Lillian, reality hit him like a freight train. Her pregnancy was far more advanced than when he last saw her. Her belly was full and round, her face etched with exhaustion and worry. Regret coiled in his chest like a vice. "I'm here," he said quietly. She nodded. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, but they didn't fall. He set his suitcase aside and sat down beside her, cautious, as if afraid she'd tell him to leave. For the next few days, they existed in a fragile truce. Ethan accompanied her to doctor's appointments, steadying her when she climbed steps or lay down for an ultrasound. Sometimes she accepted his help. Other times she politely declined, a silent reminder of the distance between them. Then, in the dead of night, everything changed. Lillian jerked awake. A sharp, unbearable cramp twisted through her stomach. Panic shot through her as she gasped for breath. "Ethan." He was already there, crouching beside her, eyes wide with alarm. Lydia rushed in, taking one look at her daughter's ashen face before grabbing the phone. "I'm calling an ambulance." By the time the paramedics arrived, Lillian was clutching Ethan's arm, her breath ragged, pain making her tremble. "It's too soon," she whispered, eyes clouded with fear. "The baby. I've got you," Ethan murmured. "You're not alone." He climbed into the ambulance with her, never letting go of her hand. At the hospital, under the harsh glow of fluorescent lights, doctors rushed into action. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. She was going into early labor. Ethan watched, helpless, as they wheeled her into the delivery room. Then, for the first time in months, Lillian locked eyes with him. And in that moment, past the hurt and betrayal, they were just two people fighting for the same thing, their child. Hours blurred together in a haze of monitors, doctors barking instructions, and Lillian's exhausted cries. Then, a piercing wail filled the air. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Their daughter was here. Tiny, perfect, alive. Relief crashed over him so hard his legs almost gave out. But even as he held his newborn daughter for the first time, his joy was tinged with guilt. This was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of his life, but it was overshadowed by the truth. He had betrayed her mother. He glanced down at the fragile new life in his hands, and something inside him shifted permanently. It didn't matter how much he had failed before. He would never fail her. Lillian, weak but stable, watched Ethan cradle their baby. She saw the way he looked at their daughter, with raw, unfiltered love. And for a moment, she saw glimpses of the man she had once loved. The memory was bittersweet. As the crisis passed and both mother and child were deemed safe, Lillian drifted into exhausted sleep. Ethan didn't. He sat beside her, running his fingers through her hair, eyes burning with regret. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'll make this right, no matter how long it takes." And this time, he meant it. Vanessa Lawrence's life crumbled before her eyes. Producers refused to hire her. No brand wanted to be associated with a blackmailer. She still strutted into clubs and upscale bars, but the paparazzi barely cared anymore. Her name had become poison. In one last desperate move, she tried leaking her affair with Ethan to a minor gossip site. But before the story could gain traction, Callaway Technologies unleashed a legal hurricane. Madeline Kim's ironclad legal warnings crushed the scandal before it could explode. Every major news outlet backed away, unwilling to risk defamation charges. Vanessa was finished. And Ethan? For the first time in months, he was finally free. Lawsuits crushed the scandal before it could spread. Vanessa Laurent had lost everything. Producers blacklisted her, friends abandoned her, and without Ethan's financial support, her lavish Soho apartment was repossessed. Now she rotted away in a cramped studio, burning through what little savings she had left. She had spent so much time trying to destroy Ethan's life, yet in the end, she was the only one ruined. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Ethan and Lillian focused on the only thing that mattered, their daughter, Everly Rose Calloway. Slowly, Lillian regained her strength. And to everyone's surprise, Ethan stayed. He took every late-night feeding shift, learned how to swaddle, changed diapers without flinching. Lydia, watching quietly, remained skeptical, but admitted to herself, maybe he was trying. One afternoon, as Everly napped in her bassinet, Lillian finally asked, "Why are you still here?" Her voice was quiet, careful. Ethan looked at their daughter, then back at Lillian. "Because I love you. Because I can't imagine my life without her, or without you." His voice was raw. "If you'll have me." Lillian sighed, her gaze fixed on the sleeping infant between them. Love isn't supposed to destroy the person you claim to care about. Ethan swallowed hard. "I know," he said, "and I know I can't take back what I did, but I can spend every day proving to you that I'm not that man anymore." His hands curled into fists. "The affair was the biggest mistake of my life." She studied his face, searching for deception. "It's too soon to talk about reconciliation," she finally admitted. "Maybe we can try counseling, but I won't forgive easily." Ethan nodded immediately. "I'll do whatever it takes." Lillian didn't respond right away. Deep down, she saw the sincerity in his remorse. She saw how devoted he was to their daughter. But she also saw Bianca's face in that office, mocking her, laughing at her pain. It took everything in her not to let the bitterness win. Lillian decided to stay in Chicago for now, surrounded by her family. Ethan shuttled back and forth between New York and Chicago, splitting his time between Calloway Technologies and fatherhood. It was awkward, but it gave Lillian the space she needed. Lillian started therapy, determined to heal. Dr. Patrice Rousseau, a renowned clinical psychologist, helped her confront her deepest insecurities. Bianca was glamorous, ambitious, Lillian confessed in one session. "Sometimes I worry I'll never be enough for Ethan." Dr. Rousseau leaned forward. "Bianca's allure was manipulation and cruelty," she said. "It wasn't real." Lillian exhaled sharply. It was the first time she felt like she could breathe again. Meanwhile, Ethan attended couples counseling via video call. Lillian agreed, but only with strict boundaries. Together they started unpacking the past. Ethan confronted his own mistakes, admitting that his need for validation had blinded him to what truly mattered: his wife, his child, his family. Then, just as life began to stabilize, Vanessa struck again. This time she filed a civil lawsuit against Ethan for emotional distress, for manipulation and coercion. She was desperate, grasping for any way to financially recover, but Ethan's legal team shut it down instantly. His lawyers laughed at the claim. They had enough evidence to bury her. Vanessa had played her final card, and this time, she had nothing left to gamble. Vanessa Laurent's final attempt at revenge came in the form of a frivolous lawsuit. She claimed emotional distress and coercion, hoping to force a settlement. But Ethan's lawyers? They didn't even flinch. "This lawsuit is actually an opportunity," Alan Roy, Lillian's attorney, explained over the phone. "If Vanessa wants to argue distress, she'll have to provide evidence. That opens the door for us to present the extortion tapes." Lillian's jaw tightened. "She just never stops, does she? First, mocking my pregnancy, then blackmailing Ethan, and now this?" "She's desperate," Alan said simply. "She thinks she still has power." Lillian exhaled, steadying herself. Not this time. Ethan flew to Chicago, meeting with Lillian and Alan in person. "If she has no real evidence, she might withdraw," Alan predicted. "We can even countersue for defamation and extortion." Ethan nodded. "Whatever it takes," he said firmly. "I won't let Vanessa drag Lillian and Everly through this mess." The thought of testifying in court unsettled Lillian. She had already endured so much humiliation. But she wasn't the same woman Vanessa mocked in that office. "If it comes to that, I'll testify." Her voice was quiet but unwavering. "I'll tell the judge what she did, how she humiliated me, how she tried to blackmail Ethan. She doesn't get to play the victim." Days before the preliminary hearing, Vanessa's lawyers reached out. They wanted a settlement. Malene Kim, Ethan's attorney, shut them down instantly. "We have you on tape extorting my client," she reminded them. If you want to avoid criminal charges, drop this lawsuit immediately. Vanessa's team panicked. Within 48 hours, they withdrew the case. Media outlets barely covered it, just a small gossip column that disappeared in a day. And just like that, Vanessa Laurent faded into obscurity. Her name? Tainted. Her career? Ruined. Her attempts at vengeance? Erased. With Vanessa gone, Ethan and Lillian finally glimpsed a future free from her shadow, but that didn't mean their marriage was magically healed. Every time Ethan's phone buzzed, Lillian felt a pang of doubt. Each business trip stirred old fears. Therapy helped, but the scars remained. Ethan put in the work to regain her trust. Full transparency, phone, emails, calendar. Frequent check-ins, reassuring her without her even needing to ask. No secrecy, no excuses. While some might have found it excessive, Ethan knew it was necessary, because he had broken her trust. And now, he had to earn it back. Lillian softened over time. She watched how naturally Ethan took to fatherhood. He lit up every time he held Everly, sang lullabies at night, prepared bottles, changed diapers without a word of complaint. But beyond being a father, he also became her partner again. Ethan encouraged Lillian to reclaim herself. "Don't forget who you are," he told her one evening. "You're not just a mother." She hesitated. She hadn't danced since before her pregnancy. Would her body still remember? Would she? Encouraged by Ethan, she started teaching ballet again at a local studio in Chicago. At first, the mirror felt cruel. Her movements? Rusty. Her body? Foreign. But then she felt it. The grace. The rhythm. The part of her she had almost forgotten. And when Ethan showed up at her first class, sitting in the back just to cheer her on, she felt something shift. Maybe, just maybe, he really was becoming the man she had needed all along. It started with a simple invitation. Nothing extravagant, just a walk by the lake. Ethan had asked Lillian if she'd like to take a stroll along Lakeshore Drive. Just the two of them. No pressure, no expectations. Her mother offered to babysit Everly for the evening. At first, Lillian hesitated. She wasn't sure if this was co-parenting or if it was something more. But curiosity and the quiet echo of old feelings nudged her to say yes. They walked side by side, hands politely at their sides, the cool autumn breeze rustling through the golden leaves. At first, the conversation was light, updates on Everly, remarks about the changing seasons. Then, Ethan found the courage to speak from the heart. "I know I don't deserve another chance," he admitted, voice low. "But I need you to know that every single day with you and Everly is a day I'm grateful for. And if you'd let me, I'd spend the rest of my life proving that to you." Lillian stopped walking. She turned to him, emotions storming behind her eyes. "I want to believe you," she whispered. "But every time I think about Vanessa laughing at me, mocking my pregnancy, I feel that pain all over again. You were part of that betrayal, Ethan, and I don't know if I can ever forget that." Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't make excuses. Instead, he gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Don't forget it," he said quietly. "We can't erase the past, but maybe we can build something new, something stronger." She held his gaze for a long moment. Then, without a word, she started walking again, and Ethan followed. Months turned into a year. Lillian made the choice to move back to New York City, but not into the penthouse. Instead, she rented a modest apartment near Central Park, a place that was hers and hers alone. A fresh start, a new beginning. Ethan respected her space. He visited daily, helping with Everly, proving his devotion not just with words, but with actions. They continued therapy, unraveling the deep-seated wounds in their marriage. Ethan's craving for validation. Lillian's avoidance of conflict. They learned how to communicate, how to set boundaries before resentment could grow. It was grueling. It was uncomfortable. But it was also transformative. One day, Ethan led Lillian into Harrington Innovations headquarters, specifically his office. The last time she had stood here, Vanessa was mocking her. Lillian's chest tightened with anxiety. Ethan noticed. He took her hand. "I replaced the desk," he said softly. Lillian glanced around. The office was different now. Gone was the cold and personal space. In its place, warm-toned artwork, comfortable seating. A framed photo of Everly and Lillian on the desk. "I want you to see that this place isn't a stage for secrets anymore," Ethan murmured. Lillian swallowed hard. She could still see it all so clearly, the spilled coffee, the humiliation, the betrayal. But instead of tears, she took a slow, deep breath. She circled the office, fingers grazing the desk, the walls, the past. Finally, she stopped by the window overlooking the city skyline. Ethan stood behind her, hesitant. "I'm sorry," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. Lillian turned. For the first time in a long time, she really looked at him. "I know," she said softly. And for the first time since the betrayal, her guard lowered, just a little. The garden behind the small Manhattan chapel was illuminated by golden string lights. Rows of white chairs were filled with close friends and family. Even Mark Cuban, one of Ethan's earliest investors, had flown in to show his support. At the altar, Ethan stood waiting. His heart pounded not from fear, but from hope. This wasn't about starting over. It was about starting again, with honesty, with love, with real commitment. As Lillian stepped forward in a gown simple, elegant, and free of extravagance, he realized this wasn't just a wedding. This was a promise. One he would never break again. Ethan stood at the altar, his hands steady but his heart racing. He adjusted the cuffs of his tailored charcoal suit, his eyes never straying from Lillian as she walked toward him. Violet in her arms, her face radiant with quiet strength. They had chosen to renew their vows, not because they had erased the past, but because they had faced it together. They had walked through betrayal, heartbreak, and regret, only to come out stronger. No marriage is perfect. But this was real. The officiant turned to Lillian first. She took a breath, her voice trembling with emotion. "Ethan, we have walked through darkness and found our way back to the light, not by pretending the past never happened, but by learning from it. I stand here today because you proved, through your actions, that our family matters more to you than anything. I promise to keep choosing this love, to face every challenge by your side, and to never again let silence create distance between us." Tears welled in Ethan's eyes. Then it was his turn. He held her gaze, his voice raw with honesty. "Lillian, I have been broken by my own mistakes, but your strength, your grace, put me back together. You gave me Violet, and you gave me something I never thought I'd have again. A second chance. For that, I devote the rest of my life to honoring the faith you placed in me, to never taking for granted the gift of your love." As he spoke, a soft giggle broke the silence. Violet, watching from her grandmother's arms, clapped her tiny hands. Lillian laughed through her tears. Ethan smiled, and as the officiant declared them bound by love once more, they sealed their vows with a kiss. Applause erupted, tears were shed. But more than anything, hope filled the air. As the sun dipped low and the garden lights twinkled overhead, Ethan and Lillian danced beneath the soft glow. Their foreheads touched, their hands entwined. They knew that nothing could erase the past, that Bianca's cruelty and the pain that followed would always be part of their story. But scars are not wounds. Scars prove survival. And in that moment, as Violet's laughter echoed in the air and Ethan held the woman he almost lost, they both understood a simple, unspoken truth. Sometimes you have to lose everything to finally see what truly matters. And when you do, you hold on to it with everything you have. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of deception, heartbreak, and redemption. Lillian's unwavering strength as a mother and a woman reminds us that no betrayal, no luxury, and no ambition can break a person who chooses to fight for herself and her child. Ethan's journey, from selfishness to genuine remorse, proves that even the worst mistakes do not have to define us if we have the courage to face them head-on. And Bianca? Her downfall is a cautionary tale, a reminder that manipulation and cruelty rarely lead to victory. Like this video to show your support. Share it with someone who needs to hear this story. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful real-life drama fiction. Your support helps us continue bringing stories of resilience, love, and the unbreakable human spirit to viewers across the world. Bookmark, thank you for watching.